3 young girls were killed, murdered after they were kidnapped by their father, according to prosecutors. They've charged Travis Decker, 32 years old, with the deaths of his daughters, 9-year-old Peyton, 8-year-old Evelyn, and 5-year-old Olivia. He's currently out on the run. They found the girls' bodies after they were reported missing. They were found in a forest outside of Leavenworth. Now, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered. And I understand, of course, that because the suspect is out on the loose, that is, from a law enforcement perspective, the biggest concern. This is what they have to focus on, is getting this guy. That's what Chelan County Sheriff Mike Morrison said.
Travis, if you're listening, this is your opportunity to turn yourself in. We're not going to go away. We're not going to rest. And we're going to make sure we find you. You will be brought to justice.
Now, of course, after something like this happens, the question becomes why, and could anything have been done to prevent this from happening? And sometimes it's an unfair question because things happen, tragedies happen, murders unfortunately happen. But other times you look at some of the facts and you can reasonably say this didn't need to happen and something was missed, or multiple somethings were missed. You look at the facts in this case, and we're told, at least via the girl's mother, talking to detectives, said that Travis Decker was, quote, currently experiencing some mental health issues. King 5 reports that when he was picking up his daughters for a scheduled visit, according to the mom, the ex, she said that he was, quote, quieter than usual, which was out of character. She then said he received some sort of ticket recently, and, you know, for his financial situation, it was a burden. They say he was dealing with garnished wages due to back child support, so he owed child support. She said that he was talking about getting rid of his dog because of his financial concerns. And you see that he is considered, or was considered, to be homeless. How in the world does someone like that have access to children? Any children? How does that person have access? Now, I know some people will say, usually on the left, in this case, this was someone who, according to the ex, he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And she said, according to King 5, that she didn't think he was taking medication for it. Where is the courts to step in and say, you don't have to give your daughters over to this man? And you're not supposed to say anything about his borderline personality disorder because that could be stigmatizing. I'm told it's stigmatizing to talk about it. Just because someone has borderline personality disorder doesn't mean that they can't have access to their kids. I certainly on the surface agree with that, but it also doesn't mean we do give access just automatically without at least some pause to someone like this. Why in all of this was there not an Amber Alert? There was no Amber Alert from the Washington State Patrol. And they have since come out and said, well, we've got 5 standards issued by the DOJ that we have to use in order to justify issuing an Amber Alert. And instead, they put out a notice, but it's not the same as an Amber Alert, which is everyone's had it happen, right? You're doing, mind your own business. All of a sudden, your phone starts blaring. It does that to get your attention, and you read the text or the alert, and then you're maybe more on the lookout for these individuals who are suspected of kidnapping kids. But beyond that, they know that other people are now on the lookout. And it might get them to just turn themselves in and not make it worse. Now, the 5 standards for the Amber Alert has to be, number 1, there's reasonable belief by law enforcement that an abduction has occurred. Now, they say over at the Washington State Patrol that there was no indication at the time that these girls, quote unquote, disappeared, that this was an abduction presumably because this is the father and maybe he was scheduled to have time with these girls. They say, number two, the law enforcement agency has to believe that the child is in imminent danger of serious bodily harm or death. Washington State Patrol has come out and said, we had no reason to believe that he intended to hurt these kids. Now, should they have held that position? In retrospect, obviously, no. Does that mean they made the wrong decision at the time? I don't know. They're going to have to figure that out. And there needs to be an investigation on this. Because when you look at the three other aspects, the standards that you have to hit, assuming you believe that there was an abduction, this would qualify. But you have to qualify for all five. Now, people who knew these girls, family members, friends, neighbors, teachers, they spoke out at a recent community vigil out in Chelan County. And you hear the stories that you expect to hear. These were sweet girls. I mean, how could you say otherwise when we're talking about such young kids, a 9, 8, and 5-year-old kid? That's just so incredibly tragic. And as one woman said, and Como was there to capture it, there's nothing that anyone can say that will make this any better.
We want to share their light and see one another. No amount of questions or their answers will properly soothe the pain that we bear.
You have Evelyn's dance teacher, Lindsay, spoke to Como TV.
All three girls love each other, just the sweetest to each other. They would both come to dance. Big sister was always there. We have a recital in a couple weeks. We're going to save that spot there for her, and she's going to be dancing in heaven.
This poor woman, this poor family, this poor community. And, you know, obviously, if you're a parent, this story is going to hit you a different way than if you're not a parent. Because you think about your own kid. Maybe your kid is the age of one of these three girls when they were murdered. You can't even imagine what could go through someone's mind to commit such a heinous act. And you're going to have that conversation with your own kids. If you're a parent in this community who knew one of these three kids, you're going to have some conversation with your own kids about what just happened and bring up these very adult themes to them.
How do you tell a 10-year-old who shouldn't be exposed to this reality that a father can do something like this?
And I don't know if there's an answer for that. How do you tell? You just say it in a way that is going to cause the least amount of alarm and trauma and stress. And I don't know if there is a way to do that. I don't know. There's certainly no guarantee on how a kid is going to process this kind of information. And they shouldn't have to process this information. And yet here we are. And I would argue it's because we live in a state that makes it way too easy for people who should have nothing to do with kids get access to them. And as we learn more, we'll obviously be able to piece the puzzle together a little bit better, get a better understanding as to why this happened and if truly anything could have been done, including maybe making a different decision on the Amber Alert. Could something have been done to help save these kids? Chris Loftus is the spokesperson for the Washington State Patrol. He spoke to Como on the lack of Amber Alert.
In short, it didn't meet the federal requirements for an Amber Alert. We were having discussions with them from Friday night on. We weren't eligible for the Amber. Then what could we use? And the IMPA was the best we could do. The difference between IMPA and Amber, the Amber has that push notification that we all get on our phones, makes the loud noise, and you have to look at it and you have to turn it off. So you have to address it. The IMPA does not.
And EMPA, by the way, Endangered Missing Person Alert.
I have that. Just because a parent with custodial privileges is late bringing a child back does not mean there's been an abduction. And it's important that we maintain those requirements lest our alert systems become noise rather than signal. We do all we can do, and sometimes it's not enough, and it breaks your heart.
And I will certainly say, keeping my own bias in check here, I'm always looking for, and I think especially after something like this, the reasonable person will react and say, can we find something that happened that should not have so we can ensure that this doesn't happen again? It's not just about placing blame, but we should be placing blame when we need to place blame. But it's also about ensuring that this doesn't happen again. And while I'm always looking for that, I also have to acknowledge, all of us have to acknowledge, as I said at the start of the show, sometimes tragedies happen and there's nothing that you can do that could have stopped it. And we have to be open to that painful possibility.
So tell me about your involvement in this case with the missing girls in Wenatchee.
Well, our office, the State Patrol, coordinates the alert systems for the state. We have 4 different alerts: the AMBER, the IMPA, the Missing Endangered Person Alert, the MIPA, which is the Missing Indigenous Persons Alert, and then the Silver Alert. And so our MUPU, well, we've got a lot of abbreviations, but our MUPU, which is our Missing and Unidentified Persons Unit, coordinate the alert systems. So I work closely with them.
What was the alert that was issued in this case with the 3
It was
girls?
an IMPA, an Endangered Missing Persons Alert, which is for someone who cannot assist in their own recovery. So if someone is, because of age or some sort of cognitive impairment or physical impairment, not able to assist, then it will be an IMPA. AMBER alerts are a federal program. The other programs are state programs. And so the AMBER alert has very specific federal requirements.
Yeah. Talk to me about that. I mean, it sounds like those requirements weren't met in this case.
There are 5 requirements. The first is obvious: 17 or younger, is because it's for children. The second one is the one. There are 2 of the 5 that this situation didn't meet, and the second one was that there's evidence of abduction. Now, just because a parent with custodial privileges is late bringing a child back does not mean there's been an abduction, and so there was not specific evidence of an abduction. But there was 2 of the others. It was being investigated by a local law enforcement agency and reported to the FBI and all those sorts of things that are required. And the fourth thing is there was ample information that would help us find the people if we had the alert. Sometimes we'll have folks say, my daughter's missing, my grandfather's missing, whomever's missing. They don't have a photo, they don't really have a very good description, they don't know exactly where he or she was. They don't have a vehicle license or description. There's just nothing. They're missing. But in this case, we had all of that. So we had ample information. But then the last requirement is the one that really is the one that didn't allow it. And that was that there's direct evidence that the person that's missing is in danger of serious bodily injury or death. And we just didn't have that in this case.
The EMPA, it sounds like, is sort of...
It's a catch-all.
It's a short of, we want to get this word out.
Yeah.
I know we as media organizations, we received it. Talk to me about the scope of when an EMPA alert goes out.
Well, both the AMBER and the EMPA go out to, all of our alerts go out to our broadcast partners, and you folks do a great job. Coma does a great job of putting the word out, whether it's radio, television, your social media, and so it amplifies the alert immediately. There's also a listserv that people can sign up for, and we have thousands of people across the state who have signed up and get every one of our alerts. And then with EMPA and AMBER, we have a relationship with the Department of Transportation where they use their variable message boards, the reader boards, and so you get, the missing person, they get a vehicle description, that sort of thing. But the difference between IMPA and AMBER, the AMBER has that push notification that we all get on our phones, makes the loud noise, and you have to look at it and you have to turn it off, so you have to address it. The IMPA does not have that. But other than that, this was a very wide-ranging alert that went out across the state. We target them geographically. And I believe it was on Saturday where, in discussions with the Wenatchee Police Department, where we expanded the geography of the alert system. I believe it went from north central to northwestern region, which is a much bigger, all-encompassing region. But we were having discussions with them from Friday night on about what can we do. If the AMBER was not going to be able to use that, if we weren't eligible for the AMBER, then what could we use? And the IMPA was the best we could do.
Yeah. There was also a lot of ground searches going on. I mean, was State Patrol assisting in that?
Mostly the local investigating agency, but for instance, right now our crime scene team is looking at the crime scene. So we're involved as requested by the local investigatory agencies.
Yeah. Anything else you feel like we want to add? I know a lot of people are asking that question about why didn't this AMBER alert go out. In short, what would you tell them?
And it's important that we maintain those requirements lest our alert systems become noise rather than signal. They're very effective because they're used in a targeted fashion. I believe this year there's been 3 AMBER alerts. There's been 14 IMPA alerts. There's been 22 MIPA alerts, the missing indigenous persons. There's been 42 silver alerts. So, the farther away you get from those specific requirements, the more likely you are to have the alert. But ask yourself, when you see an AMBER alert, do you pay attention more than a silver alert? Well, you do, because you know the importance of it. We expanded the IMPA through the day. Monday, we got word that he may be thinking about leaving the state, so we worked with the states that were possible. So continuing to expand, and of course Friday in that search, they physically found the bodies. And we don't know the timelines. We don't know when the girl was killed. We don't know whether the alerts would have made a difference. We just don't know. Yeah. But we do all we can do, and sometimes it's not enough, and it breaks your heart.